You know, it's the highest honor for peacemakers on the planet. But what happens when the person being nominated is one of the most divisive figures of our time? Today, we're going to crack open the case file on a question that has sparked absolute firestorms of debate all across the globe.
And look, this isn't some simple yes or no question. It's a rabbit hole, really. It takes us right to the heart of how we even define peace, the inner workings of global diplomacy, and that really messy place where politics and prestige collide. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to treat this like a high-stakes investigation. We'll look at the evidence, we'll scrutinize the rules of the game, and we'll even dive into the psychological biases that shape how we all think about this. So, let's open the file. Okay, so to really get a handle on this whole debate, you first got to understand the prize itself. And as you're about to see, controversy is, well, it's practically baked into the Nobel's DNA. It all goes back to this, right? Alfred Nobel's will. The goal was to reward those who gave the greatest benefit to humankind. It sounds simple, but how you interpret that phrase has been fiercely debated for more than 100 years. Because when you're trying to define the greatest benefit to humankind, the stakes couldn't be higher, could they?
All right, let's get to the evidence. What specific actions actually led to these nominations in the first place? We're going to examine the two key exhibits that supporters always point to as proof of peacemaking. So you've got two major things on the table here. On one side, you have those historic high-stakes summits with North Korea, and on the other, the landmark Abraham Accords in the Middle East. Both were, without a doubt, huge diplomatic moments. The real question is, do they actually add up to a Nobel-worthy peace? Okay, first up, the North Korea summits. The big claim was that these face-to-face meetings broke a really dangerous stalemate and finally put denuclearization on the table. But a lot of analysts pushed back, saying it was more about political theater than any real substantive change. And the outcome? At the end of the day, while tensions definitely seemed lower at the time, no actual, verifiable denuclearization ever happened. So if the North Korea situation was all about symbolism versus actual results, the Abraham Accords are, well, a whole different animal. Supporters called them a historic game changer, normalizing relations between Israel and several Arab nations for the first time. The main criticism, though, was that these deals only happened because they completely bypassed the core, long-standing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The outcome was definitely real. Tangible diplomatic ties were made, but the question of whether that equals comprehensive peace in the region is still very much up for debate. Okay, so we've looked at the evidence, but that's only half the story. To really judge this case, you have to know the rule book. So how does someone actually win the Nobel Peace Prize? Okay, listen up, because this right here, this is probably the single biggest misunderstanding about the Nobel Prize. Just being nominated is not the same thing as being a finalist. It doesn't mean the committee endorses you, it's just a formal proposal, and honestly, it means a lot less than most people think.
So who gets to make these proposals? Well, it's a surprisingly big group of people. We're talking university professors, politicians from all over the world. Every single year, hundreds of people get nominated, but only one prize is actually given out. Once you get that it's this huge funnel, it kind of helps cut through all the media hype, you know?
And let's be real, the Nobel has always been political. Just look at its history. From Kissinger's award during the Vietnam War, to Arafat's super controversial win, and even Obama getting the prize so early in his presidency, the committee has a long track record of making choices that light up a global debate. So this whole discussion around Trump, it's not some weird new thing. It fits right into this long, messy pattern. All right, we've covered the facts, we've covered the rules, but that still doesn't explain the deep, deep divide in how people feel about this. So to understand that, we need to shift gears from the political to the psychological. Why is it that two people can look at the exact same evidence and come to completely opposite conclusions? Well, the first piece of the puzzle is something called motivated reasoning. Think of your brain less like a neutral scientist and more like a lawyer that's hired to defend what you already believe. If you already support a leader, you're hardwired to find and highlight evidence of their success. And if you already oppose them, you do the exact opposite, focusing only on the failures. And then there's this other fascinating idea, moral licensing. It's like we all have this subconscious balance sheet in our heads. For some people, a really big diplomatic win can feel like it cancels out or gives a license for controversial actions in other areas. A huge win on foreign policy might be used to excuse, say, turmoil back at home.
So when you put these two psychological forces together, the debate stops being about a careful review of the evidence. It morphs into a test of which side you're on. It becomes about your identity, not a calm assessment of the facts.
All of this, it really pushes us toward a much bigger question, one that goes way beyond any single politician. What does this entire firestorm tell us about how we, as a global community, even define the idea of peace here in the 21st century?
So let's really break this down. What are the potential upsides versus the dangers here? On the one hand, giving the prize could send a powerful message that bold, disruptive deal-making is something we should reward. But on the other hand, you risk legitimizing deals that haven't really proven themselves yet, politicizing the prize to a point of no return, and even letting it be used as a tool for propaganda back home.
So, where does that leave us? What's the current thinking? Well, according to recent expert analysis, the general consensus is that an award is pretty unlikely. The Nobel Committee has this long history of trying to resist public and political pressure campaigns, usually preferring to reward things that have stood the test of time over flashy, headline-grabbing deals.
In this quote, man, this really hits the nail on the head for why this matters so much. A Nobel Prize isn't just a trophy. It's an act of historical storytelling. The story the committee chooses to tell sends a massive signal about what kind of behavior and what kind of peace the world should celebrate.
Which really leaves us with this final, fundamental question, doesn't it? When we talk about peace, what are we actually trying to reward? Is it about the pragmatic, hard-nosed deals that rearrange the political map today? Or is it about that long, difficult, often frustrating search for a deeper, more lasting kind of justice? The answer to that, well, that might just define what peace looks like for generations to come.